Hi everyone, today I'm showing you how to varnish an acrylic painting on canvas or on paper. And before we start, I'll just quickly emphasize why we actually need to varnish an acrylic painting. Of course, if you're just learning how to paint and you're not planning on keeping a work, you can skip varnishing, but varnish is what is protecting our painting long term, because acrylic by itself attracts dust and dirt very easily. If you have pets, also the hairs may stuck on the surface. But another consideration is that over time acrylics can fade, even though like good brands like Liquitex or Winsor & Newton or Golden, they're pretty light fast. It doesn't mean they 100% will not fade at any time. Light fastness usually, great light fastness usually accounts for around 50 to 100 years in gallery conditions. And we are not always able to assure a gallery condition when we sell work, or we display it at our home, or we just store it somewhere. Also, of course, varnish can alter the finish, because we see that acrylics normally dry to somehow satin or maybe semi-gloss finish. Some of acrylics are specifically made to dry to a flat matte finish, but if we want to change that, or if we want to add extra sheen and extra gloss to our painting, we can change it with a varnish. And also, of course, any tiny scratches that can damage our painting. Varnish also helps us keep moisture out of our canvas and our paint. And if you choose in gloss varnish, it can enhance the colors. And if you choose in a matte varnish, it can make the colors look a little subdued. So I was talking about varnishes, and for example, this liquid varnishes, and you can see there are matte, satin, or gloss version of it. Those are student grade varnish, but also there are professional varnishes, and they also can be liquid, or they can also be spray. I use spray mostly when it's the surface is not very flat, and with papers or panels, because when there is texture on my canvas, I like to spray the canvas, because it will go in all these nooks and crannies better than brush, in my opinion. But of course you can test and see what works best for you. And there are also non-professional, like kind of craft quality, not even varnishes, but some sort of varnish. It's what we know as a Mod Podge. I'm saying it's not professional because it's technically like a glue and water-based mixture that you can of course apply, and it will protect your crafts as well. But if you are selling your work, or if you are displaying your work in exhibitions, shows, galleries, or you just really want to make something professional, I would not go with Mod Podge, even though I use it for rock painting. I use it for protect decorative pieces on denim and so on and so forth, so it can still be used with no issues. And as we were speaking about different finishes, as I said, acrylic by itself, it dries to somehow semi-gloss finish, and it is a reflective finish. You can make it matte, although it will not be 100% matte, but you can apply like 2 coats and it will be matter and matter. Or you can have satin and you can have a high gloss. You can see how different, how the sheen increases, because as in a home paint, wall paint, or these varnishes, the ratio of the like sheen components increases from flat to gloss. Okay, so as we discussed, we need to varnish our painting, and there are a few options of varnishes we can choose. I will be showing you how to varnish an acrylic painting on canvas with a gloss liquid varnish and with a brush, because I am inside for now. And also, if you're using spray varnish, it's better to do it outside, because they are pretty smelly and they're also not really recommended to be inhaled in them. So yeah, for gloss varnish, as I showed, I'm using that Winsor & Newton varnish. You should be doing it outside. Okay, let's proceed to the varnishing itself. First, we need to make sure that our painting is completely dry. Even though the acrylics are super fast dry, and we know like 30 minutes to touch, and we can apply the next layer, and the next day it's dry. It feels dry, and it's called dry to touch. The fully dry painting will be within a week, and I would recommend even wait a little bit longer, because there can be changes in temperatures and humidity where the painting was drying, and the underlaying paint can be still a little bit wet, and when we will be applying varnish, it can mess up the painting a little bit. It can be muddy, cloudy, or have some surprising, unpredicted results. So first thing first, make sure the painting is absolutely dried. Then we need to clean the painting, because we cannot apply varnish over hairs or dust or anything like that, because it will stay there for next 50 years, right? So what you can do, you can of course just gently clean up your painting. Don't forget the sides as well, and do not use any like really damp. This is a dry or it can be like super lightly damp, but not too much, and I would still not do it, because any water that we will leave here will be trapped between paint layer and varnish layer, and eventually it will affect the painting. We don't want that, and we don't want any bubbles or anything, any unevenness on the surface of acrylic painting. So you can do that. And also there is a tip, a life hack. You can use simple like cloth roller to make sure there is no hairs and there is no small dust particles over the painting that the cloth may eventually not pick up. So you can just roll over. This painting is pretty clean. I don't know how it managed to stay so clean. You can see, right? But I have different paintings that attract lots of dust. Yeah. Okay, so let's say we are clean, we are good to go. Next step, we need something shallow. It can be a jar, of course, if the brush will go in without any issues, but I prefer something shallow like this. It's just a plastic cap. We need to pour the varnish in the cap, and some varnishes need to be diluted a little bit with water. For example, golden varnish needs to be slightly diluted, and they will always put it on the instructions, of course. Here I have a Galeria acrylic mediums student grade gloss varnish. Even though it's a student grade varnish, it's pretty good. I already used it, and it's also good because it is a removable varnish. If something goes wrong, or if over, I don't know, 5-10 years, you will see that the painting starts yellowing a little bit, you can remove it with special, also from Winsor varnish remover, and revarnish your painting with different gloss, with the same gloss, with a different completely varnish. So having a removable varnish, it's very, very, very important. And also, if you have sensitive skin, I would recommend using gloves, because some varnishes are not as non-toxic and safe to use as acrylic paint. They may contain some harmful ingredients, and it can cause allergic reactions, so please be careful. And if you know that your skin is very sensitive, just wear a pair of simple gloves, as I said. Okay. So also, before we start, I want to say that a traditional way of varnishing includes not only cleaning, drying, cleaning, and varnishing, but also an important step between cleaning and varnishing, which is applying an isolation coat, which is exactly what it's named, right? It makes sure it seals the painting, and it protects it from varnish, because as we discussed, varnish can have different ingredient, different composition, and some varnishes are non-removable. So if we will remove or try to remove non-removable varnish, we will damage the painting. So isolation coat will prevent that from happening, and it will stay. It will also protect the painting, but not as much as varnish. But it will also allow us to remove varnishes without being afraid that we will mess up the painting. Normally what you do is you take a clear gloss gel, for example golden, you mix it up with water a little bit, and you just apply with a brush or with a roller and let it dry, of course, for at least 24 hours, and then we can proceed to varnishing. I know that many painters now, especially if it's for home use, but even for sale, they skip isolation coat, and that's exactly what I'm doing here now. For demonstration, I emphasize the traditional way is to dry the painting, clean it, make sure it's dry and clean, then apply isolation coat, let it dry, and then only apply your varnish. But still, it's done on practice. You can varnish the painting directly, especially if the varnish is removable. If the varnish you have on your hand is non-removable, do not do it without isolation coat. I hope that's something that we will remember. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and I'll open the varnish. And also I wanted to show you that this is a gloss varnish, and we can see how clean the medium is. And if we look at this one, this is a satin varnish. It's a little bit duller and a little bit more like kind of muddier, milky, and this is matte. It's even the milkiest out of all of them. So this is also how they create this effect. And I will just pour a little bit. Of course, we need to also make sure that this plastic shallow container is absolutely clean. And yes, varnishes will smell, so you can open the windows, but it does not smell as bad as spray varnish, to be honest. And then you can apply it. You can apply it with a brush like this, because this is a small painting, or if it's a bigger painting with a bigger flat brush, of course you can use a roller or a foam brush, but I prefer a regular brush, because foamies, they are very good on loading liquid in, so that will be not a very economic use of my varnish in long term. And what I normally do, I start with the center, so there is nothing that flows over the edges and just drips. I go around, I make sure everything is covered like that. And also do not forget to cover the edges, especially if your edges are painted. Also, do not load your brush too heavily, do not press too hard. Make sure that you're not creating any bubbles. As you can see, sometimes you apply and there are little bubbles. Just make sure that your pressure is not too hard and you're not creating any significant bubbles on the surface. Yes, and you go while the surface is still a little bit wet. And if you see any visible brush strokes, what you can do to see if there is any visible brush strokes, right? You should see on the light if there is anything that stands out. But normally, like, there is no brush strokes, but still, if you have some, just go slightly over with the brush, again with not much pressure, and then it's done. If you're using gloss varnish like I did, you need to wait, depending on the brand, of course, but minimum 6 hours. I would always wait overnight because I am a little anxious person, so I will always wait overnight. And you can apply second and third layer. If you're using satin or matte varnish, you can use 2 layers and it will be enough. And also, if you want the colors to pop, you can first apply a layer of gloss varnish, but you don't want it to be like extra, right? Because gloss will be very, very reflective, especially if you're planning to hang your piece somewhere with a lot of sunlight. You can see that it's very, very, very reflective, and this is just one coat. You can always go with matte varnish on top of gloss varnish, as long as it's the same kind of brand. I'm sorry, I had to close the curtain because my phone told me that it's too hot. Please stop. Okay, so I was saying that you can make the colors look more subdued if you will first apply gloss varnish and you didn't like it, or you just want it that way, and then you can apply a layer of satin, 2 layers probably of matte or satin, as long as it's the same brand, because if you're mixing brands you don't actually know what kind of composition they both had, and you may be messing up with your painting. And also, these are specifically varnishes for acrylic painting. They are acrylic mediums, but there are also varnishes that are solvent based. For example, Golden have MCA, if I'm not mistaken, varnishes. They're solvent based, and they are for oil painting, for acrylic painting, for any kind of professional paintings. They're quite tricky to apply. They smell and they are, of course, like, have much more harsh components in their composition, so but still can be done. For beginners, acrylic varnishes, spray or liquid is enough. And as I said, now I will leave this and let it dry, and then I can go with a second and third coat for gloss varnish, because I started like that. But also, if you are varnishing paper, the sheen will be pretty much the same. Here I tested the matte, the satin, and the gloss. You can see matte is not really like 100% matte. It still is a little bit reflective, and it also will depend on the color, because on the red color we cannot really see the difference, only with a certain angle. On yellow, same, but with dark colors, because yellow and red, they're more transparent colors, and with darker colors we can see the different in finishing. And yes, this is how we varnish an acrylic painting on canvas. Pretty much same way we will be varnishing acrylic painting on paper, if it's watercolor paper. Again, I will repeat that if the painting is flat, I'm using a liquid varnish of different finishes, whatever I like. If I'm varnishing rock painting or like an easy craft, I will use Mod Podge. I even tried Mod Podge on metal, acrylic paint on metal, and then Mod Podge, and it worked. And if I have some textured work, I'm using a spray varnish. Also, important thing, once you're done, you need to wash your brush very thoroughly, and usually this will be the brush from now on for varnishing, because still the composition of varnish and acrylic paint is very different, and it can affect how the brush will work with the paint. So if you're doing varnishing of your paintings on canvas, on paper, whatever, please make sure to have a separate brush that goes only for varnishing, and the other brushes go for specifically painting. I hope you now know how to varnish in a traditional way with isolation coat, or in a more like modern, easier way, better for beginners, your acrylic paintings. And if you have any questions, please ask in comments.